My name is Megan Carter. I am 29 years old, and the story I am about to share with you is not just a memory, but a scar that has been carved deep into my heart. You see, I spent 6 long years working tirelessly, saving every single dollar, turning down every chance to enjoy myself, all so I could finally buy my own house, a milestone I believed would at last make my parents proud. But instead of celebrating with me, instead of sharing in that joy, I watched my parents and my brother-in-law use a strange key to open my door and casually lead a woman I had never met through my home, as if it belonged to them. They even left a note, written with sweet words that carried a bitter edge. "You'll understand, this is an investment opportunity for the family." In that moment, I realized that my blood, sweat, and tears meant nothing to them, that I was nothing more than a tool to patch over their ambitions and struggles. If it were you, could you bear the feeling of having your life's greatest achievement dismissed and nearly stolen by your own family? Tell me where you are listening to this story from, so I know I am not alone in this pain. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. Since I was a child, I was always labeled as the second daughter. Vanessa, my sister, 3 years older than me, was the radiant pride of the Carter family. From her high school years, she was treated like a precious gem. Every one of her achievements was displayed by my parents as if it were their personal trophy: her school debate cup, her acceptance letter from Northwestern University, and later her law degree from a prestigious school in Chicago. Relatives would often retell how my mother wept tears of joy when Vanessa received a full scholarship, and how my father opened a bottle of wine and celebrated for a week straight. When Vanessa graduated, they covered all of her rent in the heart of the city, and later secretly contributed a massive sum so she could purchase a luxury condo in Chicago. Every phone call with my mother was filled with stories of Vanessa's glamorous life, as if she were a Hollywood star, while I was left on the other end of the line, listening quietly, with only sighs of admiration filling the silence. I was different. My path had no fireworks, no spotlight. After high school, I chose to attend the local community college instead of a prestigious university. I simply couldn't afford it, and my parents had no interest in investing further in me. They told me bluntly, "You should choose something practical. Don't chase big dreams that will only leave you in debt." I quietly nodded, then worked part-time in a coffee shop while studying, saving every penny just to cover my tuition. Later, I found a job in data analysis, not glamorous, but steady enough to sustain me. My parents rarely spoke proudly of me. If anyone asked, their response was always the same polite smile and a line I came to dread. "Megan works in tech, she's doing fine, and at least she knows how to save money." That phrase, "knows how to save," became the only label attached to me, as if my entire worth could be reduced to the fact that I wasn't wasteful. I remember Vanessa's wedding vividly. It was a grand event, hosted in one of the most luxurious hotels in Chicago, with white roses covering the aisle and a live orchestra playing throughout the night. Relatives flew in from everywhere, and my parents strutted around bragging about their daughter marrying a man who was both handsome and successful. The peak of their display came when they presented Vanessa with a wedding gift, a brand new BMW, gleaming under the lights with a massive red bow tied across the hood. The room erupted in applause, guests cheering as if it were a scene from a movie, while I sat quietly among the crowd, choking down the bitterness lodged in my throat. When people turned to me and asked what I had received, I forced a smile and held up a tarnished silver necklace that my mother claimed once belonged to my grandmother. "It's an heirloom," she said with pride, as if that old trinket could ever compare to the car. I didn't dare react, but inside it felt as though acid was burning through me. In that moment, I realized with painful clarity that in their eyes, my worth amounted to a faded relic, while my sister was showered with wealth and glory. I don't blame Vanessa for being the favored one. She was intelligent, ambitious, and always knew how to put our parents at ease. But I could never escape the feeling of being nothing more than a shadow, quietly standing on the sidelines, compared in every possible way. Family dinners were always the same monochrome performance, my parents eagerly asking about the lawsuits Vanessa was handling, the wealthy clients she was meeting, the massive contracts she was signing. When the attention shifted to me, the questions were predictable and cutting in their own way. Are you saving enough money? Have you thought about buying a more practical car yet? I would sit there, nibbling at my food like an outsider, my chest hollow and heavy. The favoritism wasn't always loud, but it gradually eroded my belief in myself. When I tried to start a small data consulting service, my father just shrugged and said, "It's fine to experiment, but don't expect it to last." When I shared the news that I had been promoted at work, my mother only replied, "Good, at least you don't have to worry about being unemployed." Their words were light as feathers, but over time, they piled up into a stone pressing against my chest. Not once did they truly believe I was capable of anything significant. That was why the house in Capitol Hill wasn't just a home, it was a declaration. A statement that I, too, could build a life of my own, without their handouts, without their approval. I wanted, just once, to prove that my worth didn't lie in their comparisons or in their scrutinizing stares, but in what I could create with my own two hands. The first day I set foot inside that house, the rain in Seattle was falling in a soft drizzle. Maplewood Street was quiet, lined with maple trees already turning into the fiery shades of autumn. The craftsman-style home appeared before me, with its gentle sloping roof, wide wooden porch, and large windows reflecting the gray light of the afternoon. I was greeted by the Petersons, an elderly couple who had lived there for over 40 years. They were preparing to move to Arizona to be closer to their grandchildren and escape the cold winters. I remember vividly the way Mrs. Peterson smiled at me, kind and warm, yet tinged with sadness as she reached out to open the heavy wooden door and let me in. The house seemed to breathe with memory. Mrs. Peterson told me about Christmas dinners once held in the living room, about the sound of children's footsteps running up the wooden stairs, and about the porch swing that had been her husband's favorite seat every evening. Mr. Peterson, his hair white as snow, studied me for a long moment before nodding gently. "This young woman is simple, calm. I believe she will preserve the soul of this house." His words stung my eyes with sudden warmth, because for so many years, I had rarely heard anyone suggest that I was worthy of something beautiful or precious. After a few weeks of negotiations, the contract was signed. Holding the keys in my hand, I felt as though I was holding an entirely new future. I didn't need to announce it to my family. I didn't need anyone's permission. I drove my old Honda Civic to the front gate, unlocked it, and stepped into the empty space filled with nothing but potential. For the first time, I took a deep breath, the faint scent of old wood and garden flowers drifting through the air, and whispered to myself, "This is yours, Megan, and only yours." In the months that followed, the house became both the biggest project and the greatest joy of my life. After work, I would drive to thrift stores, hunting for furniture that could bring a sense of warmth. I bought an oak dining table with a few scratches for a bargain price, then polished it so carefully it looked brand new. I found a floral upholstered armchair at a flea market and spent an entire evening cleaning it until it became the centerpiece of the living room. I patiently planted red rose bushes along the walkway, my hands caked in soil but my heart light. Each time the first buds began to bloom, I felt as if I myself were coming back to life. Everything unfolded quietly, in silence. I didn't tell my coworkers, and I certainly didn't mention it to my parents or to Vanessa. After so many years of being dismissed, I knew that if they found out, they would only find ways to interfere. My mother would scold me for being foolish enough to buy a house on my own. My father would question whether I had enough money to maintain it. And Vanessa would offer that faint smile and make some cutting remark about how I should be more practical. I didn't need to hear any of it. For the first time, I wanted to keep a beautiful secret all to myself. I still remember the afternoon I strung lights across the backyard. The sky was pale blue, with the last rays of summer sunlight filtering through the branches, casting my shadow long across the grass. When the bulbs flickered on, their glow reflected in my eyes, I felt as if the entire world outside had faded away, leaving only me and this house. Muffin, the cat I had adopted from a shelter, wandered out onto the porch, sitting there as if he, too, understood that we had finally found a place to call home. I made a plan for myself, That Christmas, I would invite the whole family for dinner. When everyone was gathered around the table, I would smile, raise my glass, and calmly say, "Welcome to my new home." I could already picture the stunned look on my mother's face, the disbelief in my father's eyes, and the forced smile tugging at Vanessa's lips. That would be the first moment in my life when I was no longer just a shadow, but someone strong enough to write her own story. Each night before bed, I would step out onto the porch and sit on the old swing Mr. Peterson had left behind. The wind would run through my hair, the warm glow of the lights spilling from the house, and a peace unlike anything I had ever known would settle over me. I knew I was holding something precious in my hands, not just the house, but proof that I could build a life of my own without anyone's validation. And I had no idea that this peace was about to be shattered in a way I could never have imagined. It was a Tuesday afternoon, ordinary in every way. I was sitting in my 12th floor office, eyes locked on the screen filled with endless columns of data. Numbers tracking user behavior danced across the spreadsheet, and I was so absorbed that the world around me faded away. Outside the window, Seattle's sky was heavy and gray, a misty drizzle drifting past the glass, and I buried myself in work as if it were a shield against the outside world. In the middle of reviewing the report, my phone buzzed softly. A notification popped up from the security camera app I had installed at home. I rarely checked it during work hours, but something compelled me to tap. The screen lit up, showing the live feed from the camera at my front door. I froze. Standing unmistakably on my porch were my father and mother. But they weren't alone. Next to them was Ethan, my sister, Vanessa's husband, accompanied by a well-dressed woman in a beige trench coat, her designer handbag swinging casually at her side. Before I could even process what I was seeing, the next moment made my blood run cold. My father, with a motion far too practiced, reached into his pocket and pulled out a key. He slid it into the lock, turned it, and the door swung open. As if this wasn't my house at all, but some communal property they had every right to enter. My chest tightened painfully. My breath came in short bursts, my hand trembling as I clutched the phone. I stared at the feed, my mind blank. My mother smiled, gesturing for Ethan and the stranger to step inside first. On that tiny screen, I watched all three of them disappear into the very space I had guarded as my secret, my safest refuge. The violation hit me like a crashing wave. The trust and peace I had built so carefully over the past months collapsed in an instant. Rage and confusion tangled inside me. How did they even have a key? Who gave them permission to walk in? And why was Ethan part of this intrusion? I shot up from my chair so suddenly that it knocked against the desk, the sharp noise drawing a few curious glances from my coworkers. I hurriedly grabbed my bag, forcing my voice to stay steady as I told my manager I had a family emergency. My legs were trembling so badly I almost stumbled on the way out, my heart pounding as if it might burst from my chest. In the elevator, I couldn't stop staring at my phone. The living room camera showed a grainy image in the dim light, but it was clear enough to catch the shadows moving. Someone was rifling through the kitchen cabinets, pulling drawers open, even peering into the refrigerator. I wanted to scream, but my throat was locked tight. The drive home felt endless. Rain was coming down in heavy sheets, the windshield clouded with streaks of water, but I barely noticed. My only thought was to keep pressing the gas, my mind spinning with hundreds of questions. When I finally turned onto my street, my stomach dropped. My father's car was gone, the porch empty. But the front door stood slightly ajar, a sliver of space visible. I stepped out of the car, anger flaring like fire in my chest, though my palms were ice cold with fear. Inside, the house I had so carefully built felt like a battlefield. The sofa had been shoved out of the spot I had positioned with such precision. Several kitchen drawers were left hanging open, spice jars scattered in disarray. On the dining table, the vase of flowers I had arranged just yesterday was pushed aside, petals scattered across the wood. Even the refrigerator door wasn't fully shut, hissing softly into the silence. I stood there, rooted to the floor, my throat tight with bitterness. Months of effort poured into making every corner warm and welcoming had been unraveled in less than an hour by their careless hands. And then I saw it, a sheet of paper laid neatly on the kitchen counter. My mother's familiar handwriting stood out clearly. "You'll understand. This is an investment opportunity for the family." I gripped the paper tightly, rage flooding through me. They had turned my house, the first true symbol of pride in my life, into nothing more than a pawn in some financial scheme of theirs. No request, no permission sought. Just action, followed by a false, saccharine note, as if my agreement were inevitable. I sank into the armchair, the room spinning around me. The sense of betrayal wasn't only from my parents, but also from Ethan's complicit silence. He had been here, part of this intrusion, as though my home were communal property for them to negotiate over. I buried my face in my hands, my breath ragged. In that moment, one truth seared itself into me. The fragile boundary I had drawn between myself and my family had just been shattered, and nothing would ever be the same again. My phone began to buzz nonstop while I sat collapsed in the chair, the notes still clenched in my fist. On the screen, the familiar name flashed, Mom. I drew in a deep breath, blood still pounding in my ears, and pressed accept. "You saw the note I left, didn't you?" Her voice floated through, light and casual, as if this were nothing more than a reminder about dinner plans. "Why do you have a key to my house?" I cut in, forcing my voice not to tremble. There was a pause on the other end, then her tone hardened. "Megan, don't talk to me like that. I'm only looking out for you. You're my daughter, living all alone in such a big house, how could I not worry? That neighborhood isn't exactly safe. You know how complicated Seattle is getting." I let out a laugh, but it was bitter, caught in my throat. "So that's why you brought Ethan and a complete stranger into my home? Opened my fridge, rummaged through my things? That's what you call concern?" I heard my father's sigh filter through the line. "Sweetheart, calm down. Your mother is right. We only want to make sure you're not putting yourself in a difficult situation. This house is beautiful, yes, but with your salary, are you sure you can keep up? Maintenance, taxes, insurance, it's all a heavy burden." Each word landed like a knife twisting deeper. They didn't see the 6 years I had spent saving every penny. They didn't see the nights I stayed up late taking freelance projects to add to my income. In their eyes, I was nothing more than a reckless daughter, foolishly buying a home beyond my reach. "I can manage it," I said firmly. "I've calculated everything, Dad. Every number is under control." This wasn't an impulsive decision. But my mother let out a soft laugh, dripping with pity. "Megan, you always think you know best, but honestly, we have a better idea. Ethan is looking to expand his real estate investments, and this house, it has incredible potential. You could rent out part of it, or better yet, let Ethan manage it. The profits would be more than enough to keep you worry-free." It felt as though a weight was crushing my chest. So this wasn't about concern for my safety, as they claimed. They had reduced my house, the only source of pride I had, to a pawn in their financial game. "So what you mean," I said through clenched teeth, "is that my home isn't really mine at all. It's a family investment project, isn't it?" Ethan's voice suddenly came through in the background, hesitant but still clear enough. "Megan, don't take it the wrong way. I just wanted to help. Vanessa and I already talked with your parents, to ease some of the burden on you." Rage flared hot in my veins, my hands trembling so hard I could barely hold the phone. "Ease my burden? This is my house. I never asked anyone to carry it for me. I worked myself to the bone for 6 years to have this, and you barge in and talk about turning it into some property for Ethan to manage? Do you even hear yourselves?" My mother's tone shifted, sharp and scolding. "Don't be so ungrateful, Megan. We only want what's best for you. You can't handle this alone, you'll see soon enough. I already spoke with Denise, my friend who has experience in real estate, and she agrees this house is too much for you. Be realistic." "How?" Those 2 words, "too much," landed like a crushing blow. I gripped the phone tighter, my eyes burning. I was used to being underestimated, but never had the humiliation been so raw, so blatant. They didn't believe I could stand on my own. Even my greatest achievement was something to be questioned, diminished, and plotted over. Enough, I said slowly, each word hammered out like nails. Starting tomorrow, I'm changing every lock. No one is allowed to step foot in my house without my permission. Not even you. If anyone tries, I will call the police. There was silence on the other end, then my father exploded. How dare you speak to your parents like that? This is the family's house, you're just holding it in your name for now. I cut him off, my voice cold as ice. Number. This is my house. The deed is in my name, the money came from me. No one has the right to decide anything about it except me. If you can't respect that boundary, then I'll protect myself. My mother's voice cracked, caught between anger and wounded pride. You'll regret this, Megan. When you go bankrupt, don't expect us to reach out a hand. I didn't answer. I simply ended the call, my hand trembling, but my eyes growing steady. Deep down, I knew this was the moment the line had been drawn. And once a line is drawn, the relationship can never return to what it was. That night, I sat in the dark, muffin curled in my lap. Pain and fury twisted together, making my heart ache and burn with a strange, fierce strength. They had betrayed me once by invading and trying to claim the only thing that was mine. And I swore, from that moment on, I would never let anyone cross that threshold unless I chose to allow it. This was the first climax of betrayal, and I knew the battle had only just begun. In the days after that phone call, my house felt unusually silent, not because of the absence of sound, but because of the cold emptiness that seeped into every corner of the walls. My family went completely quiet. No calls to check in, no simple text asking, "Are you okay?" Instead, their silence carried the weight of a silent verdict. Megan is the stubborn daughter, unwilling to listen, and if she brings trouble on herself, she can deal with it alone. In that heavy silence, only one message arrived, and it cut through me like a knife. It was from Vanessa. Short, sharp, and cruel. Play your little secret game, only to end up failing. Punctuated with a cold, smirking emoji. I read it over and over, my hand shaking, anger and humiliation rising hot in my throat. Vanessa never missed a chance to remind me that in her eyes, I was nothing but the clumsy younger sister, reckless and destined to never make anything of myself. Ha! I quietly set the phone aside, too drained to reply. I was used to comparisons, but being mocked by my own sister at the exact moment I was most vulnerable felt like standing alone in a dark room with the walls closing in. During the day, I buried myself in work, pretending nothing had happened. But at night, when the golden light from the living room lamp cast my shadow across the wall, I could feel the loneliness clawing inside me. I had thought that by drawing a boundary I would feel relief, but the reality was far harsher. The price I paid was a quiet estrangement from the very people who shared my blood. Then one Friday night, as I was chewing on a dry sandwich at the kitchen counter, a knock echoed at the door. I hesitated, my heart suddenly racing, but when I opened it, a familiar face appeared. Rachel stood there, wrapped in a thick sweater, carrying a bag of food and a bottle of red wine. "Surprise?" she grinned, stepping into the house as though she had always belonged there. Rachel had been my closest friend since community college, the one who had seen me through every burnout, every breakdown, and every time I clawed my way back up. "Heard you just shook the entire Carter household," Rachel teased as she set the bag on the table and opened a steaming box of lasagna. I laughed, a sound I thought I'd forgotten how to make in the past few days. "News really does travel fast," I murmured. Rachel poured wine, handed me a glass, her eyes free of judgment, filled only with genuine concern. "So, are you going to tell me what happened, or should I get the details from your nosy neighbor?" And so, in the flicker of scented candles and the rich aroma of melted cheese, I let everything spill out. I told her about the scene on the security camera, the note my mother had left, the fiery phone call, and Vanessa's mocking message. With each word, it felt like a boulder was being lifted off my chest. Rachel listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, sometimes squeezing my hand to steady me. When I finished, silence lingered for a few seconds. "Megan, Rachel finally said, her tone serious. This isn't just about the house, it's much bigger than that. Your whole life, they've belittled you, treated you like you were less. This house is proof that you're capable of standing on your own. And that terrifies them. They don't want to see you independent because it shatters the picture of you as the small, helpless daughter who needs their protection. So, instead, they try to take it, to turn it into a family project, so you'll have nothing left that's truly yours. I sat in silence, the wine in my glass trembling with each swirl. Rachel's words struck the deepest part of me, the place where decades of hurt still lived. She went on. You have to fight, not just to keep this house, but to keep yourself. If you back down now, they'll look down on you forever. But if you stand firm, you'll realize you're worthy, and you don't need anyone's permission. Tears slipped down my cheeks. Not from weakness, but because, for the first time, someone truly saw me not as Vanessa's shadow, not as the stubborn daughter in my parents' eyes, but as a person with worth of my own. Rachel pulled me into a hug, warm enough to push away the chill that had clung to me these past days. I whispered, I'm scared, Rachel. I'm scared if I keep fighting, they'll really hate me. Rachel shook her head, her eyes steady and fierce. They already do, Megan. But the question is, will you hate yourself? If you give in, that regret will haunt you for the rest of your life. That night, for the first time in days, I ate with an appetite, laughed out loud, and felt my home glowing with warmth. Not because of the lights or the roses in the garden, but because someone finally believed in me. I realized then that I wasn't completely alone. Rachel had rekindled the flame inside me, the one my family's betrayal had nearly extinguished. And I knew, from that moment forward, I wasn't just protecting the house, I was protecting myself. A Megan who would never again settle for living in the shadows. One Thursday afternoon, just after I left work and was making my way toward the parking lot, I froze in my tracks. Parked right beside my old Civic was a sleek black Lexus. I recognized instantly Ethan's car. He was leaning against the door, hands shoved into his pockets, his usually polished, charming smile replaced with a look of unusual tension. For a moment, I thought about turning around, pretending not to see him, but his eyes locked onto mine, forcing me to stop. Megan, we need to talk, Ethan said, his voice stripped of the confident tone of a successful businessman, replaced instead by something urgent, almost pleading. I gripped my bag tightly, wary. If this is about the house again, I have nothing to say. Ethan gave a small, helpless shrug. Just give me 5 minutes. No Vanessa, no your parents, just me and you. There was something in the way he said it, the way his gaze faltered, that made me pause. My instincts told me there was something darker lurking behind his words. After a moment's hesitation, I nodded and walked toward him. We sat inside his car, the scent of leather and polished wood thick in the air, mixing with a suffocating tension. Ethan drew in a deep breath before speaking. You deserve to know the truth. The last time your parents came to the house, that whole thing, it started with me. My heart lurched as I turned to look at him. He avoided my eyes, pressing on. Vanessa, her law firm, it's in serious trouble. They lost 2 major clients, and there's a lawsuit that could drag the whole company under. We're drowning in debt. I sat frozen, stunned. Vanessa, the flawless role model, the family's shining star, was crumbling behind the glittering facade? Ethan spoke slowly, each word weighted with unease. The bank demanded additional collateral if we wanted a loan to save the firm, but we had nothing left in our names. The house in Chicago is already mortgaged, the cars too. Then your parents found out. They thought of your house. My eyes widened, my voice breaking. You mean, they planned to use my house as collateral for Vanessa's firm? Ethan nodded, his face clouded with guilt. They believed it was the only way to get your sister through this. They said you're still young, you can always start over. Your house is an opportunity for the whole family. How 10? The words crashed into me like a hammer blow. So all their talk about worrying for my safety, about fearing I couldn't handle the responsibility, had been nothing but a cover. In truth, I had never been seen as an independent person at all. Even the one achievement I had fought so hard for was instantly rebranded as a resource to rescue the family's golden star. The injustice burned so fiercely inside me that I dug my nails into the seat just to stop myself from sobbing in front of Ethan. "Do you even understand what you've just admitted?" I hissed, my voice trembling. "For years, I've been belittled, compared, pushed to the sidelines. I accepted it. I stayed silent. But now, when I finally have something that is mine, you all sit around and scheme behind my back to take it away? What am I to you, a backup bank?" Ethan lowered his head, his voice shrinking. "I won't deny it. I was desperate. Vanessa's pride wouldn't let her ask for help. I thought, maybe you would understand, because after all, we're family." I let out a harsh, bitter laugh. Family? Family that treats me like a disposable pawn. Family that doesn't even bother to ask me before plotting to use my house as collateral. Don't you dare say that word to me again. The car fell into silence. Ethan said nothing, his tired eyes fixed on the steering wheel. I opened the door, but not before turning back, my voice hard as stone. "Tell Vanessa and my parents this. If anyone dares to interfere with my house again, I'll get a lawyer involved. This is my legal property. No one touches it, not even family." I stepped out, the cold wind slapping against my face, though my chest still burned with fury. It felt as if a curtain had been ripped away, exposing a truth more brutal than anything I had imagined. That first betrayal had only been the surface. The real wound was deeper. They had never seen me as an independent person at all, only as a tool to safeguard Vanessa's glow. After meeting with Ethan, I went home seething with anger and utterly drained, but the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. If I stayed silent, I would never have control over my own life. They would always find ways to interfere, to take what was mine, and then excuse it all under the banner of family interest. I couldn't allow that to happen again. That night, I opened my laptop, pulled up my contacts, and called a law office a coworker had once recommended. The man who answered was an attorney named Mark Reynolds, calm, measured, his voice firm and steady. I laid out the entire story, leaving nothing out. From the moment I bought the house, to keeping the paperwork private, to my parents using a key to bring Ethan and a stranger inside. Mark was quiet for a moment after I finished, then said, "You did the right thing by calling me. The first step is to review every legal document you have. If everything is in your name, then no one, not even your parents, has the authority to make decisions about your property. We'll have grounds to protect you." His words were like a sedative, soothing the storm inside me. For the first time, someone outside of my family didn't see me as reckless, but as a rightful homeowner in need of protection. The next day, I carried every document I had, the purchase agreement, the mortgage papers, the insurance contracts, to his office. Mark went through them page by page, his eyes sharp and serious. After nearly an hour, he finally looked up and gave me a small, reassuring smile. "It's completely clean. This house is solely yours, and no one else has any claim to it. Even if they have a key, entering without permission is a legal trespass. If you want, you can file a notice of violation right away." Ah! I felt the weight lift from my chest. For months, I had lived in fear that everything I had built could be stripped away. Now, at least, I knew the law was on my side. Leaving the law office, I immediately called a security company. They came out and replaced every lock, installed an extra deadbolt, and added a smart lock with a PIN code I could change weekly. I also requested 2 additional cameras, one for the backyard, one for the side porch. The technician gave me a sympathetic look and said, "A lot of our clients deal with problems caused by their own relatives. It's sad, but you're right to protect yourself." His words cut bitterly, yet they only strengthened my resolve. When everything was finished, I sat at my desk and drafted an email to my parents, Vanessa and Ethan. My words were brief and firm. The house in Capitol Hill is legally my property. Any unauthorized use, unlocking, or bringing strangers inside will be considered trespassing and will be handled according to the law. If you wish to visit, you must call in advance and wait for my permission. Failure to comply will force me to involve the police. This is not a threat, but a basic boundary. I read it over once, my hands trembling slightly though my heart surged with determination, then hit send. The reaction, of course, came quickly. My father called almost immediately, his voice exploding through the phone. "Megan, what the hell are you doing? Sending an email to your parents as if we're criminals?" I answered calmly. "I don't consider anyone a criminal, but what you did with my house was trespassing. If you can't respect my boundaries, then I have no choice but to involve the law." My mother's voice shrilled in next, sharp and furious. "You'll regret this, turning your back on your own family." I didn't waver. The only regret I would have is continuing to let myself be disrespected. Then I hung up. This time, there was no trembling, only the steady silence of resolve. But I knew that building walls wasn't enough. If I wanted to end the cycle once and for all, I needed a face-to-face confrontation, not another phone call, not another email. I wanted to force them to look at me, inside the very house they had tried to claim, and hear the words I had never dared to say out loud. The idea struck me: a family dinner. Not to reconcile, not to appease, but to take control on my own terms. I spent the entire week preparing. I cleaned every room, arranged the dining table with care, even bought a new set of silverware. Not to show off, but to prove that I was more than capable of creating a home, even if no one had ever believed it. I also prepared my evidence. Copies of the deed, my mortgage documents, and Mark Reynolds' written statement, all neatly tucked into a folder. When the time came, I would place it right in the middle of the table, proof that could not be dismissed. On Friday evening, I typed out a group message to my parents, Vanessa and Ethan. Sunday, 6 p.m., dinner at my house. I want the entire family here. There are things we need to make clear, face to face. I pressed send, set the phone down, and felt my heart pound, not with fear, but with the weight of knowing this would be a turning point. They might come with suspicion, with anger, even with contempt, but this time, I would not back down. In the warm glow of my kitchen, I laid out a white tablecloth and set a vase of red roses in the center. The golden light draped over everything, creating a scene both dignified and calm. I looked around the room and caught my reflection in the glass door. What I saw was no longer the overlooked younger sister, but a grown woman ready to defend her rights and her worth. That night, I sat on the porch, listening to the wind whip through the trees, and whispered to myself, "This time, Megan, you'll say everything. No more fear, no more bowing your head. This isn't just dinner, it's a trial for fairness." And in my chest, for the first time in years, a steady flame began to burn. Sunday arrived faster than I expected. All day, it felt less like preparing for a family meal and more like suiting up for battle. I woke early, made lasagna with fresh tomato sauce, simmered a pot of creamy pumpkin soup, and toasted garlic bread until golden. The scent filled the kitchen, warm yet heavy, mirroring the clash inside me. Every step I took, every sound of the knife against the cutting board, felt like the beat of a drum pushing me closer to the moment when I would finally force my family to see me for who I was. At exactly 6 o'clock, the sound of cars pulled into the driveway. Through the window, I saw my parents' old Ford pickup, followed by Vanessa and Ethan's Lexus. They stepped out, their faces tight with unease. My mother, wrapped in a dark blue sweater, tried to stretch a smile across her lips. My father's eyes swept the house, appraising it like a property under inspection. Vanessa emerged with her usual air of superiority, while Ethan trailed behind, silent and visibly uneasy. I opened the door, steadying my breath, and said evenly, "Welcome to my home." I moaned. The air inside was heavy as lead. I decided to show them around before sitting at the table. "This is the living room," I began, gesturing toward the vintage armchair I had bought from a flea market and reupholstered myself. I did this chair on my own. It took me 3 nights to finish. My mother gave a perfunctory nod, while my father tapped the armrest lightly, his face unreadable. I led them upstairs, pointing to the photographs I had taken and framed myself. I repainted this entire room lavender. All by hand. I knew they didn't truly care, but I still said it, because it was the truth. Every detail in this house had been built by me, and no one had the right to dismiss that. When everyone was seated at the table, I set down the tray of lasagna and poured wine into each glass. Taking a deep breath, I pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket, the very note my mother had left behind. I laid it flat in the middle of the table and asked, my voice clear, "You wrote this, didn't you?" My mother's face flickered, though she tried to recover. "Megan, you misunderstood. I cut her off. "No, Mom. This isn't a misunderstanding. This note proves that my house was being used as an investment opportunity for the family. But, in reality, it was meant to bail out Vanessa and Ethan's firm, wasn't it?" The dining room fell silent. Vanessa set her fork down, her blue eyes flashing with irritation. "How do you know so much? This isn't your concern." I met her gaze steadily, unblinking. "Not my concern? You all plotted to use my house as collateral, and you expect me to stay quiet? I've been silent my entire life. Since I was a child, every achievement of mine was minimized. I was praised for being good at saving, while you were paraded as the star. You got cars, while I got a tarnished necklace from Grandma. And now, even when I've bought a home with my own hard work, they still want to take it for you. Tell me, how much longer am I supposed to stay silent?" My father furrowed his brow. "Megan, you're overreacting. We only wanted to help the family get through a difficult time." I turned to him, my voice sharp. "I've heard enough of that word help. Does help mean stripping away my hard work? Does help mean refusing to see me as an adult? All my life, in your eyes, I've been small, powerless. But the truth is, I worked myself to the bone for 6 years, turned down every chance at joy, just to buy this house. And in one instant, you all reduced it to a bargaining chip on the table. That isn't help, that's betrayal." Vanessa slammed her fork down, her tone biting. "Do you think you're so accomplished? If my firm collapses, the entire family's reputation suffers. Do you even understand what it means to sacrifice for others?" I laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. "Sacrifice? I've been sacrificing all along. I sacrificed my youth to work. I sacrificed recognition to live in your shadow. But not this time. I won't sacrifice my home to patch up your false glory." Ethan stared down at his glass, knuckles white around the stem. At last, he exhaled heavily. "Megan's right. Our firm is in real trouble, and we did think about using the house. That was my fault. I pulled everyone into this." Vanessa snapped her head toward him, her eyes blazing. "Shut up, Ethan." But I only looked at him and gave a small nod. "Thank you for finally telling the truth." The air was so thick it seemed the only sound left was the ticking of the wall clock. I drew in a breath, then rose to my feet. "Listen carefully. This is my house. I will not sell it. I will not rent it. I will not mortgage it. If anyone tries to interfere again, I will treat you as strangers, and I will call the police." I paused, letting my eyes sweep across each of them. My parents, faces tight with shame, Vanessa flushed with anger, Ethan staring down at the table, unable to meet my gaze. The silence that followed was heavy enough to hear my own heartbeat. But for the first time, within my own family, I felt I truly had a voice. Not a frail voice begging for comfort, but the voice of a woman who knew what she wanted and would defend it to the end. Dinner ended with no one taking another bite. They left in awkward silence, and I stood in the doorway, watching the glow of their headlights fade down the dark street. The house sank into stillness, but this time the quiet was not loneliness. It was liberation. After that night, my house returned to peace. No more arguments, no more watchful eyes or patronizing words. Just me, the golden light spilling from the ceiling lamp, and Muffin curled up on the sofa. Inside, I felt an emptiness I couldn't quite name. I had longed for this moment, the moment when I could finally claim my voice. But when it came, it carried both pain and relief. My family walked away in silence, leaving behind not only this house, but also the remnants of a childhood where I had spent years chasing their approval. The next day, my father sent me a brief text. I'm sorry if what I said last night hurt you, but you should understand, everything we do is out of concern for you. An hour later, my mother followed with a longer message, circling around her words but delivering the same idea. I'm sorry for overstepping, but I still think you're too stubborn. We only want what's best. Reading them didn't ease my heart. They weren't real apologies, just excuses. They still couldn't truly admit their wrongdoing. Vanessa stayed completely silent. No message, no call. Her silence was like a wall of ice, and I understood she would never forgive me for daring to step out of the role I had always played in the family, the role of the one who stays behind, who always yields. A few days later, as I sat alone in the living room, Rachel appeared with a bag of pastries and 2 cups of hot coffee. She sank into the chair beside me, resting a hand on my shoulder. "You look like someone who's just been through a storm." I gave a small laugh. It was a storm. But I think I'm still standing. Rachel shook her head, her gaze soft. "Not still, you are standing. I've never seen you this strong." Her words settled over me like a balm. In that moment, I realized I wasn't entirely alone. In the weeks that followed, I began to open my arms to the people who truly cared. Rachel came often, sometimes bringing along 2 of my closest colleagues. We cooked together, we laughed, we turned the living room into a gathering place. I would look around and see that the house no longer felt empty. Laughter echoed off the walls, the aroma of food drifted from the kitchen, and conversations stretched late into the night. For the first time, I understood clearly. Family doesn't have to be bound by blood. Family is made of the people who listen to you, who respect you, and who stand by you when you're at your weakest. Sometimes, I sit alone on the porch swing, looking out at the row of roses I planted with my own hands. I think about my parents, about Vanessa, about all the years I lived in their shadow. My heart still aches the ache of a child who longed to be loved equally but never was. Yet alongside that pain, I feel a new kind of relief. I dared to draw a boundary, to say, enough. I know the road ahead will not be easy. Maybe my parents will never acknowledge me the way they proudly exalt Vanessa. Maybe the distance between us will never close. But I've found something more precious, the freedom to live true to myself. I've realized that a home is not just 4 walls or a name on a deed. Home is the place you choose to belong. For me, this house is proof of my strength and my resolve. Every wall, every brick carries the imprint of my labor, the nights I sacrificed, the tears and the laughter I poured into it. No one can take it from me because it is an extension of who I am. And more than that, I've come to understand something deeper. Sometimes, blood family is not the place that gives you safety. They can love you, but they can also wound you in the most profound ways. They can use concern as a mask for control, and love as a cover for possession. But real love does not impose. Real love is believing that you can walk on your own, while being ready to stand behind you when you need it, not when they do. I want to leave these words for anyone hearing my story. If you feel dismissed by your family, if you feel your voice is never heard, remember that you have the right to set boundaries. You have the right to protect what you've built, and you have the right to choose where you truly belong. Don't fear loneliness, because sometimes in that very loneliness, you will find new people, people willing to become the family you always dreamed of. I, Megan Carter, finally understand that happiness doesn't come from being recognized by my parents or my sister. Happiness comes from recognizing myself. And as I sit in this house, hearing the laughter of friends echo through the rooms, watching the warm glow of the lights fall on the roses in my garden, I know, I've found home. Not the place they chose for me, but the place I chose for myself, and sometimes, that alone is enough to be called freedom.